So here we are. Are you ready? I'm ready. If you want to be ready to preach, pastor, and prosper in ministry by the end of this hour, I promise that you're going to have a plan to get you ready. And if in fact you stick with me until the end, I have a gift for you. So don't let me forget to give you that gift, and don't forget to stick to the end. We're not going to be here that long, but stick with me. And I got a special gift for you that I've never given to anybody before. Okay. All right. Many of you know that preaching and preachers are close to my heart. I've been doing it for 50 years, but I've always been struck by how many people I have met who have said they have been called to preach and yet are not doing it. How about you? Have you ever met people who tell you, who suggest to you, who straight up declare to you they've been called to preach, but they ain't doing it? This webinar is called Are You Ready? Because for many of us, that really is the main question. For if the question was, are you saved? The answer would be yes. If the question was, are you a Christian? The answer would be yes. If the question was, are you gifted? The answer would be yes. If the question was, are you called? The answer would be yes. If the question was, are you anointed? The answer would be yes. If the question was, are you willing? The answer would be yes. If we name this thing by any of those questions, the answer would be yes. In fact, the answer to most, if not all of these questions would be an unequivocal and categorical yes. But when we ask, are you ready to preach or to be ordained? The answer is, well, you see, what had happened was, that's how we answer that question. Or, well, that's kind of complicated, Or we answer, well, tell you what you mean by ready, and I'll let you know if I'm ready. Or we say, well, not yes and not no, but sort of yes and sort of no. In other words, when we ask, are you ready to preach or be ordained, we don't get a quick answer and we don't get a straight answer. Why is that? How is it that a person can be saved, called, gifted, anointed, willing, able, and yet not ready? Well, the one thing that keeps many from getting ready is they have questions about the need or necessity for any kind of certification. They have a question. Who needs a license? Why does anyone have to be ordained? And because they can't get past those questions about the need for certification, they never really get to actually being certified or moving forward in ministry. These people who have this question about certification, they maintain you don't need any other person to prepare you to preach, since God is the one that called you. Why do you need anybody to prepare you if God is the one that called you? If God called you, he ought to be the one that prepared you. Well, you could have had a clearer call than the call that Saul had. I mean, that was pretty striking on that Damascus road. He heard a voice, didn't see a person. He heard a voice. He saw a light, got knocked off of his beast, and pretty much he was called. In fact, his call was so public that even the people who was traveling with him, they heard it, even though they didn't see anybody. So you can't get any clearer of a call than the call that Saul had. And yet it took Ananias and Barnabas to get him ready. He was not ready to preach unless and until somebody like Ananias and Barnabas prepared him to preach and helped coach him into the ministry. This crowd that also says that you don't need certification by other people, they say you don't need a license to preach to know how to preach. Just like you don't need a license to know how to drive, or you don't need a license to know how to do hair, or you don't need a license to know how to fix cars. All of us know about people who have cut hair and done hair in their basement or in their kitchen. All of us know about people who have fixed cars underneath a tree. And all of us know about people who, well, I started to say people who know how to drive but don't have a license. Well, what about the people who have a license and don't know how to drive? Well, either way. But this crowd says that you don't really need a license to preach. And they're right, because there's some people who are so gifted that they just can do it. And the license doesn't teach them how to preach. Well, licensing and ordination does not necessarily give you the ability to preach or to pastor. But here's what it does. It will make your intention to preach public. A lot of people have been called to preach. They know it, but nobody else knows it because they don't tell it. They don't tell it. They don't share it. They keep it a secret. And in many ways, people know it. They just, sometimes people know it before you do. But what being licensed to preach does, it makes your intention public. It's not a secret. You're not hiding. You're not denying it. You're coming out on Front Street, making your intention to preach public. Then licensing also meets a minimal level of proficiency. I mean, you can graduate from law school, but still not have a license to practice law. Well, you don't want a lawyer who has graduated from law school to represent you, not because that person may not be capable, but because they don't have a standard level of proficiency, which allows them in the arena to defend and protect you. That would be the same for doctors and all of that, and all these other kinds of areas of professions where they have license. People have proficiency. Somebody needs to be muted. Don't know who it is, but somebody. Okay, so anyway, when you have a license or ordination, it not only makes your intention to preach public, not only meets a minimum level of proficiency, but it also makes you free to practice. You don't have to look over your shoulder. You don't have to be embarrassed. You don't have to be ashamed, as if you are doing what we used to call bootlegging, which means doing something without a license. And so you're free to practice because you have that. And I think this is the biggest thing, and that is it manifests congregational or community support. When you get a license to preach, it means that you're just not out there by yourself, but you're being backed up by a community, backed up by a congregation, backed up by a church, backed up by a denomination. And so you're not just representing God, and you're not just representing yourself, but you have other people who have affirmed and confirmed that this calling on your life is something that they agree with and something that they are going forward with. So this is one of the reasons why licensing and certification does make sense. This crowd also says that you shouldn't have to have a license, or you shouldn't need ordination, because pastoring is only one aspect of the ministry. And that's another reason why you should, is because pastoring is only one aspect of the ministry. People say, well, I'm not going to be a pastor. I don't need all of that stuff. So let me just go ahead out and work for the Lord. But there are other areas and aspects of ministry which may require ordination that have nothing to do with pastoring per se, or being a pastor, such as serving communion. Well, you have to be ordained in many denominations to do that. You don't have to be a pastor, but you do have to be ordained. Dedicating babies, that's a function that's reserved for ordained ministers. Doing weddings, that's certainly something that the state recognizes as well, only after ordination. Funerals, that's pretty obvious. And then you have chaplaincy, you have baptism, doing baptism, and you have staff position. These are all functions and aspects of ministry which do not require you to be a pastor, but do require you to be ordained. And so if pastoring is not in your plan or on your mind, well, it doesn't mean you don't need ordination, because there's so many other things you can do as a minister, or you wouldn't be able to do as a minister if you did not complete ordination. Okay. And then this crowd still talking about why you don't need a license or you don't need ordination. They say you don't need to be ordained if you don't plan to pastor a church. Okay. And we just touched on that a minute. Let me share something with you. See this picture here? This is a picture of me. Well, which one do you think is me? It's a picture of me and my pastor, Dr. Montague J. Brackett. He was the pastor of Central Baptist Church in Baltimore, Maryland. This man licensed me. This man baptized me. This man ordained me. This man married my wife and I. This man dedicated my first child, Sybil. So basically, he was my pastor for the longest part of my life. And even to this day, I consider him as my pastor. So one of the best things he did for me was to ordain me at 19 years old before I went to college, so I would be ready for any opportunity in ministry. At this time, when you see me in this picture with my pastor, with sunshades and this gabardine suit, it was clear to me that I did not want to be a pastor. I never wanted to be a pastor because that was too much work. I wanted to be an evangelist. I wanted to go around. I wanted to preach. I wanted to, preach and just go here and go this, that, and the other. Wouldn't have to worry about officers. Wouldn't have to worry about members. Wouldn't have to worry about mortgages. Wouldn't have to worry about anything because all I really want to do was just preach. And so when I went to college, I had no intention, no idea, no plan to ever be a pastor. But my pastor, Dr. Brackett, saw that before I left Baltimore, he wanted to make sure that if anything happened when I got to the University of Pennsylvania or when I got to Harvard or wherever I went, that I would not have to come back home to get ordained. I would already be ready. So I never had a plan to be a pastor, but I was ordained by my pastor because he had the foresight to see that I might need it. And as the old saying goes, it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So even though you don't plan to be a pastor, that doesn't mean you shouldn't be ready for the opportunity if it presents itself. Okay, and here's a text that we've heard very often. It says in 2 Timothy 2:15, it says, study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. Now watch this. It does not say study to be approved, but to show yourself approved. Only God approves you. But in the process of your following your call, of your being serious about your call, that's how you show yourself approved. So the people who say you don't need another person, you don't need certification, they're half right. They're right in that God brings that certification. But the other half, and the way that they're not right, is that you don't become approved by people, but by going through this process, you show yourself approved. Okay, then let's assume if this crowd, these people who are thinking that you don't need licensing or ordination, if they're able to satisfy themselves with the need for certification, if they say, okay, all right, well, I see how you need to be certified. I see how you need a license to preach. I see how you need to be ordained to pastor and so forth. The next obstacles which prevent them from going forward are three famous P's. These are the three famous P's. And when I get to your P, you can just raise your hand in your heart. You don't have to confess it publicly, but just raise your hand in your heart if this one refers to you. And here's the first one, the biggest one. One of the reasons why people have not moved forward to complete licensing and ordination, they can't overcome procrastination. Procrastination. And of course, as I said, if that's you, you don't have to unmute yourself and testify. All you have to do is raise your hand in your heart if you have had a problem with procrastination. Something else almost always takes priority over your ministry. So they keep postponing it and putting it off. Some people just pursue another career. Instead of doing what God has called them to do, they just take off and do something else. Some people move to another church. Well, maybe if I get out of this church, nobody will know I've been called and I can start all over again. I can sit in the back, cross my legs and hide. So they move to another church. Some people go to another school. I've had people who were in seminary with me, and they went to the law school Actually, they went to divinity school before they went to law school. They really wanted to go to law school, but they figured they could get in divinity school easier and transfer from divinity school to law school. Then I had some people who were in my class when I was in college, and they were in the wrong class. They were not that they were in the wrong class because they were in the wrong class. They were in the wrong class because that was not their calling. That was not their career. So they just go to another school. They pursue another career. They move to another church. And some people wait till they get financially straight. Well, I'm going to preach when I get my money right. I'm going to preach when I clear up all my debts. I'm going to preach when I'm free of all of this baggage. I'm going to preach when I only have to work 3 jobs instead of 5 jobs. So they wait to get financially straight. Then you have others who say, well, I'm going to preach when I can resolve all my issues from the past. It's no way in the world I can stand up in front of people and preach knowing all the stuff I did. My past is too messed up. I got too much stuff back there. And when I get that stuff straightened out, I'm going to preach. Others are just afraid to step out. They're just afraid to step out. And then you got the crowd that says they're not worthy. I'm not worthy to be a preacher. I'm not worthy to carry God's word. I'm not as good as other people. I've done too much. I've made too many mistakes. I'm not worthy. And then along those same lines, I'm not qualified. So procrastination is a biggie that keep people from being licensed and ordained. And then secondly, the second famous P is they haven't had the right prompting. They haven't had the right nudge, the right thing to get them moving. They are waiting for a sign. They're waiting for a sign. I guess they're waiting for a rainbow to come across the sky, or they're waiting for God to write their name in the clouds, but they're just waiting on the sign and they haven't had that sign yet. Then some, they say, I just had to feel it. You know, I just don't feel it. I know it, but I don't feel it. So they're waiting on the feeling. Then you got some people who are waiting for something to force them. I'll do it if something just makes me, because I'm not going to do it on my own. I just have to be pushed into it. And then you have a crowd like that man who came to Jesus and said, I want to follow you. Or Jesus said to him, follow me. And he said, yeah, I'll do that. But first, let me go bury my father. And of course, his father was not dead. That's the scary part. He said, let me bury my father, to mean he was probably the oldest child in his family, and he had certain responsibilities that would be in check, in force until his father died. But, well, Jesus said, well, let the dead bury the dead, and you come follow me. So we're always waiting on something else to happen, something else we've got to do before it kicks us into gear. And then some people say, well, I just got too much cluttering my calendar. I can't do it. It's too much cluttering my calendar. They're waiting for the right prompting. Sort of like Isaiah in the temple. And in Isaiah chapter 6, we find out that in the year that King Uzziah died, Isaiah said, I saw also the Lord. I also saw the Lord. And what that suggests is that it wasn't until Uzziah died that prompted Isaiah to see the Lord in the temple that he'd been going into all of his life. And so somebody had to die in his case. That's a major prompting, but that had to happen before he accepted his call and went forward in ministry. What more prompting do you need than your call itself? God speaks to you, God's talked to you, God revealed himself to you, God shared that this is what he wants you to do. How much more do you need than to have God talk to you? Or you want to be like Dives. You remember Dives, the rich man, and Lazarus? And when Dives lifted up his eyes in hell, it was so bad that he asked Abraham to send an angel down to his brothers to warn his brothers, don't come to this place, don't come to this place. But Abraham said, if they wouldn't hear Moses, why would they hear me? You have already heard enough word, and yet that is not enough for some of us. And that's why we haven't gone beyond ability, beyond being saved, beyond being gifted, beyond being able, to the point where we have actually become licensed and ordained. Do you want to be knocked down like Saul, which he really was? Do you have to be swallowed by a whale like Jonah? Perhaps. But some people are looking for something like that to get them to get off square one and move into licensing and ordination. So the first thing is procrastination. The second thing is they need a prompting. And here, the third of the famous P's is they don't have a process. They don't have a process. They don't know who to ask. They don't know what they will need to do. They don't know where they start. They don't know when will it be over, and they don't know how much it will cost. So, I'm not putting it off, and I'm not waiting on a prompting. I just don't know how to do it. I don't know the process. I don't know how to get started, and so on and so forth. So it's the process that's holding them up. All right. So now there are those who wonder and question whether you need certification in the first place. There are those who get stuck by these famous P's of procrastination, of prompting, and then process. So let me ask you a question. What if I could offer you a process which would lead to your licensing and or ordination? Would you be interested in that? Are you ready to start getting ready now? So let's put off the concerns about licensing and ordination. Let's get rid of procrastination. Let's not wait for any more prompting. I'm going to give you a process. And let's talk about this process right now, because now, if not yesterday, is the time to get ready. I'm offering 2 classes or 2 courses next year, and one will end in being licensed to preach and the other to ordination. So when you take these courses, these classes, at the end of that, you'll be licensed to preach or ordained to the gospel ministry. Now, the first course to be licensed includes the introduction to the study of the Bible, a full course, the introduction to the study of the Bible, introduction to the study of theology, that's another course, introduction to the Old Testament, introduction to the New Testament, and Christian doctrine, part 1 and part 2. Part of core basic information that you will get on the way to being licensed to preach. And of course, it makes a whole lot of sense, because if you're being licensed to preach, it helps if you know something about the Bible, if you know something about theology, if you know something about the Old Testament and the New Testament in particular, and sound doctrine. So these are basic things that you ought to have. You've heard the old phrase that says some is called, some is sent, but some just picked up their hat and coat and went. Well, we don't want you to just pick up your hat and coat and went. We want you to pick up the Bible and know how to read it, how to use it, how to study it. We want you to know what theology is about, what the Old Testament is about, the New Testament is about, and what are the principal doctrines of the Christian faith. So all of that will be included in this course. Plus, you will have my full course on preaching in the new millennium. This is a groundbreaking course, which I did just a few years ago. And trust me, I have heard preachers who have been preaching for years go through this course, and they learn things, they see things, they pick up nuances that they've never had before. So just because you've been preaching for a long time doesn't mean this won't help you. And certainly if you're just starting off in the ministry, this will give you a firmer foundation. This is a full course on preaching in the new millennium. I'll teach you how to preach. I'll teach you how to take apart a text. I'll even teach you how to preach in your anointing. And then I have a section there where I'll teach you how to preach without notes. I mean, I go from soup to nuts in preaching, and this will be a blessing to you. You will also get a copy along with this of my book, Everything You Need to Know to Preach Like a Pro. All of this comes with the course on being licensed to preach. And then, of course, at the end of that will come the license. So you have to complete all of those things. And once you complete those things, then we assign a date and a time, God willing, in 2021 when you will receive your license. The course toward ordination includes instruction. This is the ordination on how to serve communion. I'm going to show you how to do it, how to officiate a wedding, how to conduct a funeral and preach a eulogy. See, these are things that I went to Harvard. As you know, Harvard's supposed to be a great school, and it is a great school in many ways, but nobody taught me how to serve communion there. Nobody taught me how to officiate a wedding. Nobody taught me how to do a funeral. I went to Harvard, I graduated top of my class, and they never taught me that. And so when I get into a church and I'm pastoring a church, well, how am I going to learn how to serve communion? Did nobody teach me that in school? And actually, didn't nobody teach me that in my ordination when I was ordained at 19 years old. The only requirements for ordination when I was coming up in the Baptist church a million years ago was I basically had to memorize the New Hampshire Confession. And when we came to my ordination, a preacher asked me, what do I believe about a certain article? I memorized the article, I recited it, and that was it. Nobody told me how to serve communion. Nobody told me how to do a wedding. Nobody told me how to do a funeral. They just threw me out there and say, pretty much, you're on your own. And that's why I'm saying that even if you've been ordained, you may have never been taught these things. And so when I go through this ordination course, I'm going to show you how to serve communion, how to officiate a wedding, how to conduct a funeral, how to preach a eulogy, how to lead praise and worship. I mean, that's not a given. And sometimes you can tell the difference in a worship experience just based on who's leading it. If they don't know how to lead it, God forbid what's going to happen. So there's something to be learned even in how to lead praise and worship. And then we'll go into how to baptize a person safely without breaking your back or drowning them. That's key. You don't want to do that, but somebody got to teach you that. How to extend the invitation to Christian discipleship, to invite people to become Christians, to invite them to join the church, how to make the connection between your sermon and the invitation. All of these things I'm going to teach you. How to make an offering appeal. I ask for offering. That's something. Again, that may seem like it's not much, but it's very important, especially if you're a pastor. Got to pay the bills, got to keep the lights on, and you also have to elevate people's level of stewardship, which blesses them and blesses the church. So this course toward ordination will do all those things. Plus, we'll talk about pastoral visitation. We'll talk about how to give a benediction and so much more. Okay. Now, I know that not all of you here are in the same stage of your ministry. Therefore, I am offering this information in 3 bundles, or 3 packages. Number 1, that's the biblical and theological courses and preaching in the New Millennium course and being licensed to preach in 2021. That's package number 1. That's the licensing package. And then package number 2 is preparing for the pastoral ministry. That's all of those things I'm going to teach you how to give communion, how to baptize, how to visit the sick, how to. I'm going to teach you all of that. Plus, I'm going to add preaching in the New Millennium, because I'm not going to assume that because you're ordained that you may not be able to get some pointers on preaching. So I'm going to add that to that. And then, of course, being ordained in 2021. That's in package number 2, which is the ordination package. That's the preparing for the pastoral ministry. That's the preaching course and being ordained. Okay. And number 3, if you are a person who has already been licensed, you've already been ordained, I'm offering package number 3, which is everything in both bundles without getting the license or the ordination. You get all the information and training, but you may not need the certification. Now, this may be the best situation, because you're going to get everything in both packages. The only difference is not only will you not get licensing or ordination because you don't need it, but you won't have to do the assignments. You won't have to do the homework. You won't have to do a lot of the things that the people in the classes will have to do to get their license, because you already have one. So you'll get the information. You sit in the classes. You can ask questions. You're just like a regular student, and just that you won't be required to do all of those things, but you will have access to the materials and to me in both of those, what's on both sides of those courses. So that's a pretty big deal. And it's a pretty good offering here. So now let's get to how much this is going to cost and what it includes. So the licensing package, which includes the courses and the preaching. All right. If you did these things separately, the introduction to the study of the Bible, $75. Introduction to the study of theology, $75. Introduction to the study to the Old Testament, $75. Introduction to the New Testament, $75. Introduction to the Christian Doctrine 1 and 2, that's $150, because it's 75 times 2. Plus the course Preaching in the New Millennium by itself is $499. And the book, Everything You Need to Know to Preach Like a Pro, is $15. Now, there's no charge for the licensing. We're not charging for licensing. We're just charging for the preparation. Now, if you add up all of this, the total of all of the courses for licensing, if you bought them separately, and by the way, they are listed separately on our podia.com website. So they are separate courses, but because I'm putting them together, if you bought them separately, it would be $964. But the special 2020 price is not $964, but $499 for all of those courses, plus the licensing for this first package. The second package, the course toward ordination, that includes instruction on how to serve communion, how to officiate a wedding, how to conduct a funeral and preach a eulogy, how to lead praise and worship, how to baptize a person safely. That's worth a whole lot more than $75, because if you do it wrong, you're gonna be in the hospital. You'll pay more than that. Extend the invitation to Christian discipleship, make an offering appeal, how to do pastoral visitation, how to give the benediction, and the full course of preaching in the new millennium. And of course, again, there's no charge for the ordination. Now, the total of these classes for ordination, if you bought them separately, would be $1,174. But the special price for 2020 is not $1,174, but $499. Package number 3. That's everything in both bundles, all the licensing stuff, all the ordination stuff, except getting the license. If you bought them separately, that would be $2,138. But the special price is not $2,138, but again, $499. So the licensing package, $499. The ordination package, $499. And both of the above without certification is $499. And the deadline for both of these, or all of these, is December the 31st. That's for the 2020 price. $499, $499, $499. Okay, now any of these can be paid for all at once by check, debit card, credit card, PayPal, Cash App, or they can be paid in 2 payments of $250 each. Now, in terms of when these classes are going to be held, the Preaching in the New Millennium class is going to be a 2-Saturday class that I'm going to be offering on January the 16th from 9 a.m. to 1. And the following Saturday, January the 23rd, from 9 a.m. to 1. So that's 8 hours of teaching on preaching. We'll cover the whole gamut in those 2 Saturdays. And here's the good news. We're going to be going kind of fast because we're going to be doing 8 hours. We're just going to be doing 8 hours, but you will have access to these videos and you'll be able to watch them after the class just as long as you want, so that if you get to a place, for example, if you're preparing a sermon, like, well, what did he say about this? You can go back and watch it and you'll always have it. So don't feel like because you're not spending more time, although you are spending more time, just not stretching it out, but you'll have access to these videos. And of course, if you miss a session or a part of a session, you'll be able to go back and get it. So just the preaching course, which is going to be available for both people, actually for all 3 groups, for the people who are just in the licensing, the people who are just in the ordination, and the people who are just auditing both sides. That is for all of them. And that will be January the 16th and January the 23rd from 9 a.m. to 1. Then the licensing class, that begins on Monday, January the 11th, and will be every Monday until March the 1st. From 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. That's where we do all of the introduction to the study of the Bible, the Old Testament, the New Testament, theology, and Christian doctrine. We're going to do all of that on Monday nights between 6 and 9. And then the ordination class will be on Thursdays, beginning January the 14th through March the 4th. Also, but this is from 6 to 8, and we will be doing all of those things that we mentioned in those classes. Now, here's a very important note. The certification process is automatic for members of Faith Ministries Church. And by that, I mean because I am the pastor of Faith Ministries Church, I am authorized to ordain everybody who belongs to our church. I'm not authorized to ordain people who belong to other churches unless they get permission from their pastors and from their churches and church bodies. So for non-members, these classes or the information in these classes can be invaluable. Even if you don't get ordained or licensed by us, or don't get ordained or licensed immediately in your church, just getting the information puts you in a position to be there, makes you ready, so to speak. However, you must consult your own pastor and your own church to determine when and whether your certification will take place. Here's something that I offer to pastors. Going back to when I was ordained, as inadequate as it may have been, here's how it worked. We had in our city certain people who were called catechizers. And what would happen is, if a person was to be ordained, the person to be ordained would go and study with a catechizer, and that catechizer would prepare them for the ordination exam, which took place in public, by the way. So you went to a catechizer and you paid the catechizer some money, or somebody paid him. In the case, I think my church paid for me, but he was paid. And then when he was paid, he prepared you. You went to the ordination and you were ordained. Okay, so now what I am offering to pastors is offering to do for you what my catechizer was supposed to do for me. That is to say, give your people who are working toward ministry a full preparation. Now, obviously, you can do whatever else you want to do with them, but by the time I get done with them, they're going to be ready, and you will know they'll be ready, and you will know they won't be ready just because they went to a class, but they went through a series of classes, and they have a foundation of doctrine, and they have some teaching and pointers on actually how to preach in addition to that. So if you are at a place where you don't belong to our church, and you want to get licensed and ordained, that conversation has to take place with your pastor and with your church. And if your pastor agrees that this preparation can be your step toward that ordination, then it's a no-brainer. If your pastor does not agree, this is still stuff you need to have if you want to move forward in ministry, because I promise you, it's going to bless you and put you in a better position. I've had people who have been to seminary, who have master's degrees, and then they've come taking our courses and said, why didn't I take this instead? Because they understood it better. It was more practical, and it actually prepared them for ministry. Okay, so now I did promise you a free gift. Nobody reminded me, but I didn't forget. And here it is. It's called 17 Church Growth Principles of Christ, found in Matthew chapter 9. 17 church growth principles that Christ gives in Matthew chapter 9. Now, this seems like the most out of the way, off the wall subject that who would ever think? First of all, Matthew 9, what is that about? And then secondly, 17 principles. Yeah, well, Lord gave me and showed me 17 principles that Christ gives to each of us on how to grow our churches and how to grow our ministries. If we just read the text, 17 of them there. And so when you go to our website, WiseWorks on, that says WiseWorks Online. If you go there, you're going to miss it. It's WiseWorks Online, WiseWorks Online. And if you go there and look up in the top right hand, you'll see a page that says Get Ready. Click Get Ready. And on that page, you will see not only your options for signing up for the licensing and signing up for the ordination and signing up for auditing both sections, but you'll also see at the bottom of that page a link that will take you to the 17 church growth principles of Christ from Matthew chapter 9. One of those principles can turn your church around. So that's a free gift to you, and it's going to be a blessing in your life. WiseWorks Online, wiseworksonline.com. Okay, so we've been through this. We've seen the necessity of licensing and ordination. We're going to jump past our famous P's of procrastination and prompting and process. We've got all of the stuff ready. We've got a plan if we follow it. And so let's get it done in 2020. 2021. Let's get it done in 2021. You can sign up at wiseworksonline.com. Click the tab that says Get Ready. It's in the upper right-hand corner. And we're just going to go ahead and do this year. We don't know what 2021 holds. We don't know what's going to happen, because certainly when we were thinking about 2020, we thought that was going to be the best year in the world, and it didn't actually turn out to be that. But we can ask God, we can purpose in our heart that say, this year we're going to do it. We're going to get it done in 2021. Repeat after me. Get it done in 2021.
21.
There you go. I heard one person. Praise the Lord.